Hi all, in this video we're going to show you guys how to do proper packet placement and make sure that you don't have any errors when you're using the bite tabs, taking the bisecting technique with a bite wing radiograph. That's a lot of B's, right? But at any rate, we're going to be taking bite wings using the bite tab with the bisecting technique. So first what we need to do is we've got our sensor barrier, all right? So we want to make sure that we use our bite tab. Now there are several different styles of bite tabs, so you can get any kind out on the market. Our particular clinic actually uses these. They're like a little soft cushion, so when the patient bites down, they kind of bite down into the cushion. So you're going to place that to where it's centered directly on the center of the sensor like so, okay? So now what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna place this inside of the patient's mouth, and then we're gonna teach you some other little cool tips and tricks that actually help with this particular technique. Okay. So the first thing is you're going to want to make sure that when you place this in, usually what I do is I still hold it by this cushion. Some students may hold it like this, but this particular technique is a little bit more awkward than the XCP kit because you have a lot more control with the XCP kit when you're holding it by the ring and by the bar like this with two fingers on the inside and your thumb on the outside. But so when I'm doing this, I will actually still make sure I place it in like so, but you have to get it underneath the tongue, okay? And then what I'll do is I'll kind of take this and fold my finger along the outside edge of the mouth. So that way when the patient goes to bite down, they're not gonna bite down on my glove or my finger, okay? So again, one of the biggest differences between the two techniques of paralleling and bisecting is that with the paralleling, the film is away from or towards the midline of the mouth. Whereas when we do the bisecting, the film is gonna be essentially laying up against the lingual surface of the teeth. So for your packet placement, it's gonna be very easy to determine if the sensor or if the phosphor plate is actually placed parallel with the teeth if it's leaning up against the lingual surface of the teeth. So then packet placement, we just want to make sure we're far enough forward to get the distal of both maxillary and mandibular canines. I've got the film placed in there correctly, and then I'm going to have my patient bite down. Now, you'll notice that there is no ring or no bar here. So what do? How do we line up our PID? Well, there's a couple of different tips and tricks that we can do with this particular technique. So one of the things is we want to make sure that we're checking our vertical angulation. So with our vertical angulation, you're going to notice that there is a vertical indicator scale on this machine. So the vertical indicator scale is, I'm losing my camera, is going to be right here. So you'll notice that this says 90, and then as we move it, you'll notice that this little thing right here is moving. So when we're setting our vertical angulation, we're actually going to look at the 0, which is on the top of the machine here, and then we're going to set that little line at either 5 or 10 degrees, positive 10 degrees. So 5 or 10 positive degrees. So one of the things that I teach my students, how do I figure out which way is positive or which way is negative? Well, if you move it positive, the PID actually points down. So it's the opposite of what you would think. So positive points down, negative points up, okay? So that will become more significant when we actually go through the bisecting technique when we're taking the periapicals for an FMX. But today we're just learning about the bite wings. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and change it back to my positive 10-degree angulation. Now there's a couple little things that I forgot to bring over with me, so I'm gonna grab those real quick and I'll be right back. So I have cotton tip applicators here. So this is one of the little tips and tricks in lab when we're initially showing our students how to line up the PID, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this camera back around to you guys so you can see well. All right, so now I'm just gonna kind of eyeball this, right? So if I'm gonna generally think that, okay, this is placed for a premolar, where is the front of my sensor? I can kind of see it or right here, okay? So when I look over top of the back of this PID, if I can still see part of the sensor, then I'm gonna end up getting a cone cut, because the idea is we wanna line this up to where it's centered with that entire sensor, right? So if I had it up like this or down like this for a bite wing, we're gonna end up getting some sort of a cone cut, right? So one of the ways that I teach my students to do this is you can actually attach one of these little cotton tip applicators to the middle of your PID. So this is why we use these nice little barriers. It holds our little cotton tip applicators. So you'll notice I actually have that placed from top to bottom. So if this is the top, this is the bottom, this is the middle, right? So the idea is that I want this to line up with the line of occlusion where the maxillary and mandibular teeth actually bite together, okay? So then the other part that this will actually do is help you figure out where is the front of the sensor, because if you have this too far forward or too far backwards, you're gonna end up getting a cone cut too, or too high up or too far down, right? So these are going to affect your vertical and your horizontal angulation, right? And your packet placement and your cone cutting. So the other thing we wanna make sure of is, if I was to hold this out and use this as like the alignment of the PID, or sorry, of the sensor, and if I was to place this cotton tip applicator all along the face of the PID and this, do those two things look like they're parallel? Yes, they actually do look like they're parallel, but let's just say I had it placed more so like this, okay? So now let me show you how, if I place my cotton tip applicator here, and if I hold this out, do you see how at some point these two things might probably intersect one another? So that would end up affecting our horizontal angulation, because we want the sensor to be parallel with the teeth and then the face of the PID to be parallel with those two things. So that way we don't have any horizontal angulation errors such as overlapping contacts, okay? So just as a reminder, horizontal angulation error results in the contacts of the teeth being overlapped. On a bite wing, that's not ideal because we wanna make sure that we see the interproximal spaces between the teeth, so that way we can detect any decay that might be going on that we can't actually see when we look at the patient intraorally in the mouth, okay? So that's kind of pretty much how I would line up my PID for a bisecting bite wing. So then we're going to go ahead and do our molar. So for the sake of time, normally if this was a real patient, we would take it out, give them a break, put it back in to do the molar. But I'm just gonna go ahead and put it back further in the patient's mouth, making sure that I have it lined up with the distal of my second premolar right here. So the front edge of this sensor is lined up with the mesial of the premolar, so you can get the distal in the film. It's leaning up against the lingual surface of the teeth, so I'm not gonna have any issues with my horizontal angulation from that angle. And then now I'm gonna go ahead and have my patient bite down. Remember, I'm using a positive 5 to 10 degree vertical angulation set on my PID. And then now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of eyeball this. And then I'm gonna use my cotton tip applicators to line it up and make sure that I lined it up correctly. So you'll notice that this middle one is lining up with the line of occlusion, so that's gonna help me line up my vertical angulation. Also making sure that I'm using my positive 10 degree angulation, that's also going to aid me in providing proper vertical angulation. So now the last thing I wanna do is I want to use this to check my horizontal angulation. So if I hold this out like so, you'll notice that those two are parallel with one another. So my horizontal angulation is actually accurate. But if I had it more so like this, you'll notice that that cord and the cotton tip applicator at some point will intersect, right? So then that's gonna end up causing or resulting in overlapping contacts or an error in our horizontal angulation. Okay, now if I had this up like so, I adjusted my vertical. If I had it up like so, I'm gonna end up getting a cone cut, right? Or if I had it down like so, I'm gonna end up getting a cone cut. So those are pretty much all of the errors that we could end up resulting in for that particular type of technique. So when we're doing bite wings, remember we do 4, okay? We do a premolar and a molar on one of each on the right side of the patient's mouth, and then the other 2 on the left side. So we would just flip this over, and then we would do this one on the premolar, and then of course the molar. So hopefully this helps you understand the bisecting technique when you're using the bite tab. Good luck.